You mentioned earlier that you mentioned a number of times the loss of Ackermans, your father losing Ackermans
Yes.
during the Second World War. Does that inform the control structure of Pick and Pay at the moment, which a lot of analysts are quite critical of in
Yes,
terms
they
of the
are.
way you've got Pick and Pay holdings and then the Pick and Pay stores?
Yes, my father, he was a wonderful guy, very, very Edwardian or Victorian. Never liked any debt at all, couldn't stand debt, and he, terribly courteous man, always offering chairs to customers and being courteous to everybody, and never wanting any debt. Now, I grew up with that. So when I got these shareholders in, it was because I didn't want to borrow all the money myself and have huge debts. And I was quite happy to have 51% of something rather than 100% myself, which I'd learned from an American guy. I'd rather have 50% of something than 100% of nothing. And so the loss of Ackermans was very deep in my genes, and his philosophy of not having debt. So by linking the two together, I just felt that I wanted to start again, but I didn't want to have heavy debt, and these shareholders really helped me enormously, and we built from there, and I was able to control the company without having to borrow too much money.
I was speaking to Adrian Gore the other day on this program about relinquishing control, and here's a bright young guy who has a clever idea. He goes off to the precursors of the First Rand Group and says, I need some money, please, and he dilutes all the way down to under 10%, and he feels quite sanguine about that, but then I guess he doesn't have that childhood memory of your father losing everything.
Yeah, I am quite heavily criticized by an analyst for keeping this control. But the point that's why I've kept the control, I saw my father lose Ackermans, and I lost Checkers because we didn't have the power, the share power to control the business. My father lost his whole career, and I lost my whole career. So it is that background. We could sell down and make a lot of money and go down to 10 or 12% and be very happy. But I just wanted this to be, and maybe I'm a bit of a dreamer on this, I want it to be a legacy which goes forward if my family want to continue in the business.
And when one looks forward and one looks at the family interest in the business, there is control there. Is there an intention to retain the structure?
Yes, there is. And it's my intention, but equally I don't like ruling from the grave. So I have regular talks to my family and my children, and at the moment they're all behind us retaining this control. I've got three of them involved in the business, 3 out of my 4, in different ways, and I've got 12 grandchildren, and some of them are showing interest as well. So a lot depends on the interest of the grandchildren over the next few years.
You're renowned for picking fights, but very selectively picking fights. How do you choose them? The petrol price fight at the moment, there's discussion between Pick and Pay and suppliers of a food inflation. You target these fights quite carefully.
But it's only done on a simple principle, and it really is a sincere one, and that is, I firmly believe in consumer sovereignty. It may sound trite, maybe that people think it's a nice gimmick, but I've framed my whole career based on what I learned from Professor Hutt at Cape Town University. He was a wonderful guy. He said, the consumer is the king and the queen. If you want to be successful in life, you must make them the king or the queen. And so it's enlightened self-interest. I know it's helped me enormously to run a successful business. So the fights I pick are purely to fight for that principle.
And there's a happy coincidence, I guess, that if the principle is followed through, it turns out to be a marvelous marketing exercise as well.
Yes, I've never been sort of wishy-washy about that. I've always said that social responsibility I believe in sincerely and give a lot and get involved a lot. But I've also said being involved with good deeds is good business. It's good for one's company, it's good for society, and I've never tried to be mealy-mouthed about it.
There is, I'm sure, quite a lot of corporate social responsibility where executives, and particularly their chartered accountants, perhaps look at this and say, is it really necessary to support XYZ cause? I mean, if one is not part of one's community, one can't expect one's community, I guess, to be a loyal supporter of you.
That's why I've always believed it. I learned again from an American fellow. He said, doing good is good business. It's enlightened self-interest if you want to answer the cynics. It's enlightened self-interest for your own company is good, but it is a great way to build a company. It's as important as the merchandise you sell. It's as important as the accounting.
The Americans have been an important influence, haven't they? I mean, the whole idea of supermarket shopping is quite American, is American in its context, and they've been important to you.
Absolutely enormous. This is not an exaggeration, I've been 92 times to America to look at supermarkets and developments. It's just a lifelong quest.
And the immigration authorities have never looked at you strangely?
No, I don't think so. Except when I was there for Kennedy, when Kennedy was shot in 1953, I went into a bar. I was right in Dallas for a conference, and the girl behind the counter said, "Hey, there's Oswald." They thought I looked like Oswald, and everybody ran around me, so it was quite frightening for a moment. But that's the only time I've had any trouble.
Raymond Ackerman, the founder and chairman of Pick n Pay. Great pleasure to have you on GIBS FN. Thanks for joining us.